Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. 945 candidates are vying for 222 parliamentary seats, making the 15th general election a very crowded arena. Most seats are 3, 4, 5 or 6 cornered fights. We have the Batu parliamentary constituency, the most crowded, as 10 candidates are facing off for that seat. Now, all candidates will campaign for the next 12 days until midnight on Friday, the 18th of November. And as they jostle to win over disaffected voters and fence sitters, what might sway voters at this point? My first guest tonight is Ibrahim Supian, more affectionately known as Ben. He's the Executive Director of Perdeka Centre. Ben, can we start the conversation tonight with a broad picture? I don't think Malaysia has ever been in this position before, having close to 1,000 candidates in a general election before. What trends have you observed from the seat allocations and the candidate selection, all of this that has resulted in multi-corner fights everywhere?
Well, broadly speaking, I think our country is going through a transition from what was formerly a dominant party scenario where Barisan Nasional with UMNO at the helm dominated politics in Malaysia for nearly 6 decades. With the fall of Barisan Nasional in 2018, the field has opened up for new entrants into the political market, so to speak. And with the expansion of the electoral list to include young voters and those who were previously eligible, you have even more voters. And this has, I think, opened the floodgates for many, hopeful candidates and political parties to try their luck. A lot of these people who are contesting were formerly from, Barisan Nasional or some of the other parties themselves, and then they have stepped out to try their luck as independent candidates or join a number of the many small parties that have formed since 2018. On Saturday, I was viewing the nomination in Ampang, and there were 9 candidates, and 3 of which 3 were independents. And when I spoke to one of the independent candidates who was trying his luck, he said that he had registered a political party, but it wasn't in time for the election. So you actually have a lot of people trying their luck, and I think we are going to see this for some time. Before things start to stabilize, and then there is shake-up in the market, and then some of the more credible forces begin to consolidate, and we might resemble a 2 or 3 party system.
Well, you use the phrase "trying their luck" when describing the reason behind some candidates are independents running in this election. 108 independent candidates in GE15. Compare that to the 24 independents we saw in GE14. Ben, given the disdain and even contempt, I might say, that many voters have for the current political system, the current selection of political parties, might this election see more independent candidates win seats, independent candidates who are just trying their luck win?
Well, I think I spoke to a number of independent candidates before this election campaign began. Some people drew inspiration from what happened in Australia, where the SEAL candidates, independent candidates who were coordinated on the issue of women's rights and also the environment, did very well in the Australian parliamentary elections. And so some people took inspiration from that and began to organize. So we see the likes of Siti Kasim, KJ John contesting in Batu and Petaling Jaya respectively. But beyond that, there were some candidates who were, I would say, disgruntled party members because they were dropped from the list or not selected, decided to try out by themselves. But I think it also speaks of some voters or some concerned citizens that have felt that they need to get their voices heard and put their names on the list to be chosen as a candidate. At this point in time, I'm not sure, whether any of these independent candidates will be successful because elections are very costly, expensive affairs, and therefore they are handicapped right from the get-go.
All right. Can I ask you then about defectors or party-hopping politicians who are contesting in GE15? There's this expectation that they will, quote-unquote, be punished in GE15, lose their seats or not win. do you think it is that simple that voters will remember and punish at the polls?
Well, it's not that simple because different segments, behave differently and react differently to politicians that change their stride. I think in the context of urban voters that are more enamored with, Westminster-style democracy and looking at politics as, a platform for public service, I think they would, dislike politicians that cross the aisle or change parties, especially at the last moment like this. But if you go to a rural area, let's say in Arau, or you go to Jeli or someplace like that, where the personality matters most, and where a personality has cultivated support through patronage and charitable work, then it becomes completely different. Where I think, some candidates that have been dropped from their party list have decided to cross the aisle and join another coalition. Some of them potentially could bring a few thousand supporters in support of their new position in their new party. The reason is because within certain communities, particularly semi-rural communities, the loyalty is sometimes to the individual rather than specific political parties. So, I think some of them are going to cause a serious dent in electability of the party's new candidates. And we see that UMNO have dropped quite a number of their stalwarts, long-term stalwarts, and some of these people have decided to cross the aisle and join the other side. So they might bring anywhere between several hundred to several thousand supporters to their side.
Interesting. Okay, let's focus on some of the hot seats in GE15. I'm curious about Batu because I find that interesting. The seat with the highest number of candidates contesting, a 10-corner fight in Batu. Ben, what is it that's so interesting in Batu that has made it such a competitive seat? How are you watching Batu?
Batu is a multi-racial constituency where there is a mix of some middle class and a lot of working class Malaysians working there. And it also is a seat where, you have minorities that number in large numbers, particularly in communities. And so I think a lot of people feel that they have connections there, in a sense that, the makeup of the constituency makes some people feel that their message that may be more populist or more people-centric might allow them to attract new support. So I think that's how people perceive it. But in many ways, I think Malaysians are enamored with political parties because political parties have, for the longest time, been a platform for people to surface and get their voices heard. So I think, candidates from the established parties still will be able to garner the biggest share of the vote. But I think in the situation like Batu, where the previous incumbent had won a sizable majority, he still will have an advantage, although some of the independents might whittle away the majority that has been gained in 2018.
Okay. If I may touch on Merdeka Centre's latest survey, it was released last Friday. Part of the results of that survey saw a decline in preference among Malay voters towards Barisan Nasional and a small increase in Malay support towards Pakatan Harapan. What do you think accounts for this marginal shift?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, when the election was called, we noticed that there is a dip in terms of Malay voter support for some key UMNO leaders. And I think, it goes back to candidates like who's going to become Prime Minister. I think a lot of voters are concerned about that. The reason is because we've already had 3 Prime Ministers in, about 3 years. And so people are concerned that ongoing instability is going to distract government from solving the rakyat's problems. That's number one. But number two, I think, is that for the longest time, Malay voters didn't have an alternative for, this issue of Malay rights and Malay privileges. UMNO has always been in the forefront of championing these things. And political parties like even PAS and others have had a tough time coming close to chipping away at this UMNO's strongest pillar of support. But with the formation of Perikatan Nasional, suddenly the Islamic Party and the splinter party from UMNO has formed an alternative for Malay voters. So that, I think, accounts for another reason why the support has dropped, that people feel that hey, I don't have to be forced to choose this one. I have a new option now. Let's give these guys a try. And so we noticed that the shift in support has not only gone, to Pakatan Harapan. In fact, the Pakatan Harapan share in the new surge of Malay support is fairly small, but a lot of it is actually going to Perikatan Nasional. And so that's one aspect. And I think the final aspect is, again, leadership. People are comparing the top leaders of the key parties. And I think here, not as many people are convinced that the incumbent PM, the caretaker PM, will become PM after election day, that perhaps the party president himself wants to become prime minister. And that figure, unfortunately, is fairly unpopular. And that, I think, is also a reason why the Barisan Nasional numbers have suffered a drop, particularly amongst Malay voters.
Right. My last question, the survey also pointed to difficulty in discerning voter turnout. Can you quickly elaborate? What were the challenges? Why the difficulties?
Well, when we conducted our surveys, we asked, people's intention to vote in many different ways. But what we have settled over the last several years is that we've asked people to score between, 1 to 10, 10 being most certain that they're coming out to vote. We've asked people to say, how certain are coming out to vote. So we've ended using this score system. And over the last few years, this thing has stabilized in the sense that, well, not everybody who say that they're certain of coming out will actually show up. Anywhere between 5% to 30% within certain segments will show up. So we've come up with this model. The challenge is that day by day, this figure changes, So, on last week, the figure is a certain number, like 74%. But, last night, it was about 72, So what do we make of it? I think we just have to look at the broader trend. In earlier surveys that we conducted in July, in August, in September, we found that the intention to vote, particularly among minority communities, was much lower. But now, as we approach election day, we find that voting intention has increased. What exactly will be the number, we can't exactly predict, but the intention to vote seems to be improving by the day.
You reckon it's to do with campaigning? Campaigning is improving the intention to vote?
I think campaigning is one part, but also I think voters are making their minds up in terms of who they're going to choose or who they want to avoid, finding the least worst option in the state of many candidates that are making themselves people. So I think a lot of people will come back to vote. The other thing is that in the early stages, a lot of people told us that they were not coming back to vote because they felt that, it's not going to change everything because the political arena is so fragmented. But I think as we approach election day, the numbers are becoming very interesting, that it's very dynamic, that all of the three coalitions that are vying for power actually have a decent shot at becoming taking the biggest share of seats. It's unlikely that any coalition is going to win outright majority, but I think one of them might be able to get the biggest share of seats.
Right. Ben, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time. Ibrahim Sufyan of Merdeka Centre there. A quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Telah banyak yang saya lalui. Pasang surut kehidupan membentuk diri saya pada hari ini. Dengan kerja keras, keyakinan dan sokongan padu keluarga, saya mampu sampai ke puncak. Akan tetapi, kepedihan dan kekalahan bukannya halangan. Saya mengatasi setiap halangan dan kembali kuat.
Gardenia Breakthrough, mengatasi setiap halangan.
This is the digitalization race. And the Maxis Right expertise team is going on full speed, powered by a scalable enterprise-grade fixed network, utilizing the right network, solutions, and insights. Also, businesses can focus on staying ahead of the race. What a win in digital resilience.
It takes the right team with the right capabilities to future-proof your business.
Alami kehebatan dunia Unified TV dengan lebih 70 saluran premium. dan 16 aplikasi penstreaman. Tonton dan nikmati rancangan kanak-kanak, liputan sukan, drama Korea dan filem terkini. Bila-bila masa di mana jua. Dapatkan Unify hari ini.
Panda. Mereka suka bersantai, tidur dan makan. Sekejap, kita dah makan buluh sampai habis ke? Mereka pantang dicabar. Aduh, sakit. Panda. Mereka hidup dengan gaya tersendiri.
Papa. Panda?
Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. A record number of 945 candidates are contesting in GE15, yet only 13.5% are women. Why have political parties yet again failed to field more women as candidates? Joining me now is Associate Professor Dr. Umu Atiyah Ahmad Zakwan. She's a senior lecturer at University Utara Malaysia. She's also part of the Pantau PRU15 initiative, which is focused on monitoring the number of women fielded by political parties, as well as gender sensitivity in manifestos. Dr. Umu, thank you for joining us again on the show. We last had you on before nomination day. It was a push to pressure political parties to field more women candidates. We're now post-nomination day. Unfortunately, we're nowhere near the 30% target. Can you begin by giving us an overview of the landscape as it stands? Which parties have reneged on their gender equality promise?
All right. Thank you, Melissa, for having me again. And this is so exciting to share our views and discussion about this topic. Actually, we are not happy with the numbers that appear in the candidates list. We saw Pakatan Harapan actually filed a very high number, not a very high number, but 19% of their candidates, women candidates. Barisan Nasional 12.4%. Perikatan Nasional 11%, GTA 13.8%. So basically, you can see GPS Sarawak 13%. We have Warisan 11.6%. We have PBM more than 50%, 56.6%. Okay. Yeah. Right. So basically, so overall, yeah, not so happy with the number, Melissa.
I completely agree. So no coalition, no party has hit the 30% target, except for maybe the smaller parties, as you mentioned. I do want to ask you, because the last time we spoke, it wasn't just about how many women were being fielded as candidates. It was also about how and where they were being fielded. Are there trends that you've observed? Are they being placed in seats that are considered less winnable?
All right. So it is actually surprising to see how women are placed in this GE15. From my preliminary finding, I found that PH coalition, which comprised of PKR, DAP, and AMANA. So for AMANA, they have 7 women, and 6 of them actually placed in the lawsuit. So actually, they before this they were they were not contested in the election in the parliamentary seat, but this is the new a new entry for Amanah women. So far only one seat that seems to be winnable to Amanah, which is Sepang seat, because the incumbent was from Amanah, Muhammad Hanafi Maidin, but we do not know because. Rina is there as well. Cik Asma also is there as well. The 3 women national chief are contesting there. So that is Amanah. Yeah. And then when we look into DAP and PKR, so DAP actually founded their women at their stronghold and their safe seat. So our hope is actually from these particular 2 parties, PKR and DAP. But for Amanah is slightly very disappointed because the 6 women are being placed in a lawsuit. So when you look into BN coalition, which is UMNO, MCA, and MIC, I found that
For MCA women, they were placed at the seat that they cannot win, because the majority from the opposition is very high. It's very overwhelming majority. So I'm seeing MCA women do not have a high chance to win, whereas MIC also experienced the same one, only one MIC lady. And then I think the hope from BN is actually coming from UMNO, from Wanita UMNO, because we have incumbent, and then they are placed in their safe seat. But there are some also UMNO women are placed in a very challenging seat, like what we see in Padang Besar, Parliament Padang Besar by Zahida, and we see also Dato' Amma in Kelantan. So they are actually contesting towards heavyweights from the other party. And as for PN, I also see the similar trend. For PAS, I think most of the women are actually face a very challenging contestant facing heavyweight. I found two PAS women, the Mumtaz and Zaila. I think they are going to win the seat. For Bersatu, Melissa.
Sorry. Please continue. For Bersatu, very quickly.
Yeah, for Bersatu, I'm seeing Mas Emirati can be she can retain the seat. So basically, our hope to have women in the Dewan Rakyat coming a lot from PH coalition. From BN, we are hoping for Wanita UMNO.
Right. So already few women being fielded at seats that they may not be able to win. What about this trend of women being fielded against other women? I'm seeing this quite often in some of the seats where women are being fielded, a woman candidate being fielded to contest against another woman, often the incumbent. We see 20 seats with 2 or more women having to face off with each other. Ampang tops the list at 5. I think the incumbent there is Raida Kamaruddin. Why do you think this is happening, Dr. Umu?
Yeah, I think because the trend is like, when you have incumbent women contesting, and this actually has created, a factor that attract another party to also contest women to contest that seat. I think this is kind of like normalized, in our culture, political culture. But then I think it is a loss actually to us. I mean to women, because when you have 5 women contesting, we already lost four of them. If one win is okay, but we lost 4 of them already. Right. And then what I'm seeing also, the trend that you put national women chief contesting with each other, that is actually, to me, it's not a good strategy, because we need women chiefs to be there in the parliament representing their own party. Yet, they are being placed by their respective party. So that is one observation. Another observation, I think, women often being used to test the seat. For instance, the seat that they never contested before, so they found women, to contest in that particular seat. So I'm seeing in this particular election, women are like testing lab to test the young voters. Where are these young voters heading to? Are they voting for women? I'm seeing that, and then because they might want to prepare for the next election for the state assembly next year. So that's my observation, Melissa.
That is a fascinating observation. You mentioned political culture a little bit earlier, and I do want to ask you, in terms of political culture, Zaid Hamidi has said that Barisan Nasional faced pushback pushback from men specifically within the coalition who did not want to make way for a female counterpart to contest. Historically, we know that candidate selection is 100% at the discretion of the party president. How would you change this aspect of political culture, Dr. Umu? It seems to be one of the biggest hurdles in increasing the participation of women as candidates.
Okay. I think if we can recall an interesting event where I think Bersatu, Melaka chief, right? Bersatu Bahagian, I think, one of the chiefs, she resigned. She resigned from the post, protesting because of her party actually placed women at the unwinnable seat. So to me, that is Khadijah Siddiq 2.0 already, because if we can recall our history, where the original Khadijah Siddiq, of course, in the early 50s, she objected. She was so angry because UMNO at that time did not file any women, in the election, while women worked so hard, to garner support from the people. Because previously, I still remember Khadijah Siddiq in her memoir. She was telling, they even took sampan, to go to the kampong day and night, just to get votes and support from the people. Yet nobody was filed as the candidate. So they came and then they opposed and then they wanted to boycott the election. So that is Khadijah Siddiq, the real one. So I'm seeing this one, the second one, as 2.0 Khadijah Siddiq. So I'm thinking at the moment, women are so brave now. You have to speak up to change the culture, because you need to challenge. If you do not speak up, then, this will maintain. And the political party leaders will never recognize women's contribution, even though it is the reality that they contribute, but they will not do that because of the power, the power hunger games. They want the power. So if you want to see, then speak up more like what the Malacca lady did.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Umu, for being on the show tonight. Associate Professor Dr. Umu Atiyah Ahmad Zakwan from UUM. That wraps up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.